Good morning. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We're doing a QA roundtable talk on modernising the workplace and securing enterprises. Today we're going to talk about what is the modern workplace, hopefully share some insights around the security challenges people are seeing and best practices. Sorry, my talking's not very well. Best practices for increasing security in this modern workplace. So there are three of us here today to talk about these things and entertain you. There's myself. My name is Nick Sargentson. I'm a senior solution engineer for Yubico, covering EMEA and South Africa. I've been around for a while at Yubico for about the last 3 years now. Before that, spending most of my career within the UK channel, be it that at reseller, developer, distribution, and vendor level. So I either have a lot of experience or can't hold a job down, depending on how you view it. As I say, my job here with Yubico is to act as a senior solutions engineer within the EMEA team, helping our customers and tech partners deliver solutions to the business community. So joining us today are two of our technology partners, ForgeRock and Intercede. We'll just turn on the video so you can see us all in a second and swap over to some introductions. So if I can introduce Gerhard first.
Thank you, Nick. Happy to do so. First, also good morning and a warm welcome to the audience from my side. My name is Gerhard. I joined ForgeRock about 2.5 years ago, and I have two main tasks within the company. Both have to do with cool and innovative technology. One is IoT and all the non-human identity use cases you have when you combine identity and access management with IoT use cases, and the other one are technology partnerships. Personally, I believe that technology must be deployed to make people's life easier and more secure, and not the other way around. However, it's my experience, but probably not just my experience, that technology evolves, the use of technology also evolves, and perfectly good applications and use cases become a nightmare. Just think of passwords, what they have become to us. And that leads me on to ForgeRock, why we exist and what we do. We are about 10 years old, founded in Europe, but now headquartered in San Francisco. And we help, at a very high level, we help people to safely and simply access the connected world. And to do that, we offer the industry's most comprehensive identity platform. We have identity management, access management, a governance module, a universal directory, very scalable, all and built together and built to work together. And when you look at our DNA, there's innovation on one side, but being open and supporting standards is the others. We support standards like FIDO2, WebAuthn, provide open APIs. And we do that because that's what our customers want and need. For the same reason, we've also established a technology partner network, and we're very proud to partner with Yubico. And the reason I'm here on this webcast today is a strong testament to how seriously we take this technology partnership. So Nick, thank you for having me, and Alan, on to you for your introduction.
Okay, thanks Gerhard. So I'm Alan Storey. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Intercede. We developed the MyID credential management system, which is widely used by security-conscious organizations such as government, aerospace and defense, and finance to deploy two-factor authentication credentials onto smart cards, USB tokens, virtual devices, and mobile. And our customers do that for two reasons. One is to comply with policy, security policy, and the second one is to protect themselves against data breach. So that's really replacing passwords with some of the more secure and more convenient authentication mechanisms available today.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we carry on. If you have any questions for myself or the panelists, please use the Ask a Question box that should be located beneath the player. If you type your question in there, we will collate those during the webinar, and then we will swap over to those during the back end of this presentation. Okay. If there are any technical difficulties, there should also be a support for viewers button you can click at the bottom, and that will give you some troubleshooting help. So if we kind of move on to our burning security questions of the day, and let's start with, what does a modern workplace mean to you? I'll just start from here, and then I'll hand over to our other presenters. I guess a lot of our answers to these questions have changed slightly over the last few weeks. The modern workplace a couple of months ago is probably not the modern workplace now. So from our point of view, we're seeing with the fact that the current state of the world, the way that organizations are modernizing to adapt to it, that the modern workplace is now becoming things like what we're all presenting from our respective residencies. So the office is now becoming your home, your kitchen table, sometimes maybe your lounge with the coffee table in front of you. So the modern workplace is definitely changing. It's changing immensely as far as we're concerned within the last few months. Even when this passes and travel restrictions and social distancing is eased, I think most people will agree that things aren't going to go back to how they were quickly, if at all. This is probably going to be a seismic shift in what the workplace has become. So be this your hot desking solutions, or be this working from home. Now, from our point of view, we're certainly looking at this as more the modern workplace. Whether we're doing it at home or in the office, we still need to make sure that it's secure. We still need to make sure that our users are productive, and we still need to make sure that they're not getting upset with the security we put in place. That pushback is important. So from our point of view at Yubico, we've always kind of viewed the modern workplaces wherever the user is. We concentrate very much on protecting the user, and then obviously our partners put those ring fence solutions in and protect the corporate assets and the mobility of that user. So it's changed a bit for us. So I think, how's it changed if we go to Alan first, I guess now, how's it changed for you and Intercede in this?
Okay, so I'm currently, as you say, sat in my living room. There's probably a cat scratching at the door over there. There's somebody about to shower up there. There's somebody demolishing a house over there. I'm accessing on-prem applications, cloud applications from my laptop, from my work device, from my BYOD device, and that pretty much is the modern workplace today. I think the COVID situation has exacerbated it, but I don't think it's fundamentally changed it. That need to access multiple applications from multiple devices anywhere is very much, that's what the modern workplace is, and that's what people expect these days. They don't expect to have to go into an office and put a card in a reader to log on to something. They expect to be able to do their job from wherever they are. And that's changed. And I've seen this really, a very subtle mind shift change in some of our customers, from let's keep the bad guys out and how do we focus on that, more towards how do we let the good guys in. And it sounds similar, but it's actually a very subtle difference, very much focused on how do I balance that security with a good user experience. Okay. Gerhard, what are you seeing?
Yeah, you guys make it hard for me. You mentioned everything. But the productivity and usability, or ease of use, and the step-up security, when being able to differentiate what is a standard routine and what is suspicious, I think that's really the key to success. Because as I can just repeat, you need to be able these days to work from anywhere on almost any device with the same productivity that you would have in the office, right? And then for the IT department, it's also challenging because it's not a closet in the campus or in the headquarters anymore. It's multiple clouds, some on-premise applications, some legacy. So it's a matrix that needs to be managed throughout the life cycle, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much all agreed there, aren't we? So this is the new modern workplace, and how we adapt to that. I'm very lucky. I mean, I work from home a lot over the years anyway, so I have a proper. Well, I say proper.
The new language is, this is the new normal until it changes again.
That sounds very, very Trumpish. Okay. So if we move on to our second question then, because obviously, again, the answers to these questions have probably all subtly changed over the last few weeks, but they're still incredibly relevant, if not even more relevant than we first thought about them. So, common security challenges. So, I think the common could be swapped out with maybe new security challenges here, given our acceptance of the new modern workplace. So, common security challenges as we see, these are pretty much the same we always see. Say we very much concentrate on protecting the user with the authenticator, so give them that mobility. But with this change, what we're seeing and what we're advising, and a lot of the information we're seeing coming out is that because this workplace has now evolved, we have heightened threat vectors as regards to places, people, and technology. So security challenges for places. As we're saying, we're now working from home. Your modern workplace was, if you used for working from home before, you were probably quite confident in your security. Now secure you were. Now your house is, it's pretty much like working in Starbucks, isn't it? I mean, I'm working from home here from my dedicated office with my security protocols in place that I work with every day. My wife is now working from home. She's a data protection officer, so she has a VPN going in, but that's fine. So she has a VPN, so we think we're safe. And my daughter's working from home doing her uni stuff. But because we're at home now, there is that bigger risk of my daughter might download something, somebody else might download something that was probably dormant, unobtrusive before, now has more value to those bad actors looking at it. The tech, because I'm working from home. Say my wife VPNs into her workplace, we think that should be quite secure. But those bad actors know we're working from home now, and this is the challenge now. They're looking at things like how we act at home. There's been a joint NCSC and Department of Homeland Security report out a couple of weeks ago, highlighting coronavirus threats for people, the scams, the phishing, and so forth. So a lot of that is that now, whilst phishing in the UK particularly hasn't gone up in the volume of scams that are out there, the targets has changed. They're very much focused on coronavirus, HMRC, NHS stuff, because they know people will look at them. So there's that. Also, if you look at that report, those bad actors know the vulnerabilities of your home hubs. The days are gone generally where if you're working from home, you get offered a business Soho router that is issued out by IT, that is a corporate business device. Now people expect to work using their own internal broadband, and the hackers know what firmware you've got on these things. A lot of these routers, if they're older, are very hackable to start with. There's all sorts of stuff out there, and then you've got them attacking those. They know the vulnerabilities if there are any of the VPN clients. They will then know the vulnerabilities if there are any of your routers. So those are the kind of stuff we're educating people on, which doesn't directly affect what we do as a company in Yubico, because we do the hardware authenticators. But we are trying to highlight the challenge of making sure that just because you're at home, you're not necessarily more secure. You're probably less secure now. There's a greater focus on hacking those home devices. So we want people to make sure that the user and the mobility of the user's security is there, that you step up in the systems that we're accessing, that you're not relying just on the fact that you're working at home on a router. So I swapped to Gerhard for this one to start with, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. All good points. One thing that always strikes me is working from home is you have your device, right? And it may be easily accessible by other family members, and not accidentally, not intentionally, but accidentally also things could happen, right? Files could be downloaded and stuff. So making sure that every remote worker is aware of that responsibility, but also having the tools in place. YubiKey is a good example for that, to make sure that nothing happens that shouldn't happen with the device that's connected to the corporate network via whatever other networks, and as protected or not protected they are. The other aspect that is important is not just linked to the individual roaming around the world, but also having the information in silos in the company, and how do you access them. And if you have different systems for identity and access management to access all your different applications in the company, there's a lot of things that you can incur, right? Often these are entry points for unauthorized access. They're on different life cycles with custom code in between that may not be perfectly supported. That leads often to an inconsistent user experience, and also to challenges for the company to comply with, governance and other responsibilities they have throughout the life cycle of all these identities that may be shadowed in different tools and live their own life there. So that'd be my key point. On to you, Alan. I'm sure you have additional points.
No, I think some good points there. So the issues we're really seeing are because Intercede very much focus on allowing customers to deploy two-factor authentication at scale. Those are the specific challenges we're seeing in that area. We find a lot of customers start by using smart card or a USB token with a PKI certificate internally to make sure people accessing their systems are who they claim to be. And that works well at a desktop computer, and that may hit 70–80% of their employees. But as people start to then spread out, move around, go into the shop floor, they're mobile workers, they work from home, the challenges are around, how do I get strong two-factor authentication into their hands? What are the form factors? So USB tokens help, but also people use tablets, they use mobile devices. How do I get those into the hands? If we're starting to look at people working out on the shop floor as well, there are some very different requirements there. The credentials tokens need to be much more robust. And if we're starting to look down the supply chain, there's some initiatives coming out of the US government about rules and regulations about extending two-factor authentication down your supply chain, because that's seen as a threat vector. PKI certificates can work very well internally because you can manage the trust model, but they don't work so simply externally, because then you've got to extend all your complex policies you've taken years to actually create down to somebody who's fundamentally not in your control. You're not in control of your supply chain user onboarding experience. So some of our customers are starting to look at a wider range of devices, but also a wider range of technologies. So things like FIDO, for example, may be simpler for them to implement down their supply chain, whereas they may carry on using PKI internally. So it's trying to find that mix of technologies that best fits the role of the person, the form factor, and their relationship to your organization.
Yeah. Excellent. I think that's very true. What we see a lot is that logistical side of the lifecycle management. Again, I think that's changed quite a lot in the last few weeks. That, say, PKI, nice gold standard, but if you went in with like the base Microsoft solutions, it's not going to scale. It's not going to give you that logistics. It doesn't ring fence things. But this is why we partner with people like yourselves. You that's what you're handling, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that at the moment for everybody.
Yeah, in particular, we've seen a huge increase, not surprisingly, for self-service. So people who can no longer go in and see somebody, help me with this, it's broken. I can't do that anymore. I need to do that myself from home. So huge increase on self-service.
Yeah, it's a big thing. Again, I say we see it as well. When we talk about partners and what they bring to customers, it's like they bring that self-service. You bring that lifecycle management into it. You bring that extension of the enterprise perimeter out to people and deal with what's going to become a really big thing and enabling the challenges. I think that logistics challenge is going to be the big thing. It's okay with us saying our authenticator can help you across all these different platforms, but you need the platforms there and the ability to extend that security to a user who's not going to go into an office now. Okay, so if we move on to question 3, we're trundling through these quite nicely. So how can companies best enable and secure these remote workers? Because obviously we're talking about it, they've got to be able to do it. Now, our point of view, let me stick back to video. I realized I was being quite shy and you putting the video on when you guys have to talk. So I'll bring myself back into it. So how do we help companies enable and secure these workers? So Yubico, we talk a lot to our companies about what our authenticator can do over and beyond what they've probably already got it in there for. A lot of people don't realize all the multi-factors or honors will work at the same time. So that's a lot of what we're talking about, just educating companies about what they already have from us, that, you know, if they suddenly need to swap to a different authentication process for a quick win, maybe, that they can probably do it with, they've got us, as long as their platform supports it, and then that feeds into you guys, obviously. So we're trying to make sure that they're thinking about making sure that that remote worker is secure, that what they're using to authenticate into the platforms is secure, and that the user is part of this workplace is a fundamental point of it. That their secure logins are there, that they've audited what they're doing, that they're meeting their policies, that they're meeting their compliance requirements about logging in. You know, we have different technologies on our key, and, you know, there's different levels of compliance will demand different levels of technology. You know, OTP and smart card, 2 different levels of compliance and authorization. So we're trying to talk to people about effectively enabling their remote workers, that they're putting in the right security measures. They're not rushing into just opening up their remote access. You know, they may have VPN projects that have been going for a few months, but now all of a sudden they have to roll this out to everybody. And, you know, you just don't want to blanket roll it all out. You know, think about what you're doing, think about the assurance levels you want, think about the authentication you're giving to the users and what's available, and investigate what you've got there. A lot of our customers seem to think they're going to have to go out and buy a whole new raft of stuff, and we're saying, well, what have you already got in your enterprise? You know, your IAM solution will do this for you. You know, it's like your brain. You're using 20%, and the other 80% is just sat there. It's there, but you just don't know. You haven't looked into it until now about what you can do. So, you know, this how to secure best remote workers, that you know, we've got to consider the cloud, we've got to consider on-prem, we've got to consider computer logons, we've got to consider VPN access, we've got to try and make sure we're not changing the whole business processes that we're doing at the moment to accommodate this new world order. So that's our point of view. I mean, there's, you know, the problem with just doing an authenticator was just doing authenticator. The problem with having, say, an authenticator, so people often think we do the platform. So our education about trying to enable secure workers at the moment is, you know, look at what we have, look at the different technologies, and look how it fits into what you've got. You know, because you're using certificates, like Alan was saying earlier, you know, that might be hard to roll out to remote workers now, but there's no reason why you can't then do it with OTP, for instance. So that's where we're coming from with this. So as I just mentioned, you, Alan, shall we go to you for that one first?
Sure. So I think the advice I'd give is, you mentioned it earlier, the last thing people want to do at the moment is introduce new and complex business processes. They're just trying to keep their businesses going. They need the security. So assuming they've picked a form factor and an authentication mechanism that works for their particular needs, then it's, how do I make that work from a business point of view? And Gerhard made a good point earlier when he was talking about solutions that were kept separate. They weren't an integrated solution. So I think if you treat security as lots of different systems, it's not going to work for you. You need to look for an integrated solution. So, for example, if you have an end user onboarding process at the moment, something that can issue the logon credentials at that point as part of that process and become nice and seamless actually starts to work. But that's not the same for everybody. If you have a different onboarding process for contractors, for example, then you may need to adapt that to have more of a manual process for those people. How do you bring those into your system? So it's looking at the whole solution, not just a part of it. So for example, if the YubiKey is the strong authentication device, if MyID allows you to deploy and manage those, and ForgeRock is the piece that says, now I know who this person is, what am I going to allow them to do, and give you that single pane of glass visibility on it, you start to have an integrated solution. So keeping the solutions away from silo, looking at how do I integrate those into my business processes to actually make it work for me is probably the most important thing. So look for modular solutions, look for flexible solutions that aren't going to box you in. Gerhard, do you have you?
Absolutely, yes, Alan. Thank you. And you're spot on. You know, depends on how modern or how much legacy you have deployed in your enterprise. The challenge may be bigger or smaller. ForgeRock offers a reverse proxy and identity gateway that allows you to augment and bolt on to some of the legacy solutions to ease the immediate pain, right? Ultimately, you will want a platform that is doing both, right? It keeps everything secure, but it's also frictionless and easy to use. Single sign-on, multi-factor, passwordless, all these things you would want. And you would want it as frictionless as possible for the daily routine. But if someone logs in from an odd place around the world, or the same credentials are used in a short period of time, you don't want to give that person access, or just very limited access. So it really is an assessment of how much you need to do, and then find a solution that eases the immediate challenge, may it result from COVID-19 or anything else around that, and then map out a plan of how you arrive at a more homogeneous approach that carries you into the future. We don't know what the future looks like. We had that discussion earlier. It just changed a whole lot, and it's hard to predict. I don't think we will go back to the old behavior, but we don't know what change lurks around the corner.
No.
Nick, any further comments?
No, I agree with everybody there, obviously. And yeah, just to go back, like you say, look at the modular side, and we get a lot of people. We talk about we suddenly see Radius kicking up quite a bit. So I was going to ask Gerhard, have you seen that? I mean, we're seeing quite a lot of interest in that now, and it goes back to how to enable this. And people come saying, "What do I need to put in?" It's like, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to protect my VPN more. It's just username and password at the moment. And then we'll say, well, look at the platforms you've got. Have you got a Radius solution? And we're talking about it a lot. So I'm just interested in whether you as an IAM vendor is seeing an increase in that sort of conversation as well.
Yes, we do. In general, we have a lot of discussions with customers that have legacy solutions from, vendors like CA or Oracle that have been in place for a long period of time, that are making it very difficult to deploy these new things. And as I mentioned in my comment earlier, we have capabilities in our platform, not to rip and replace in the first instance, but to augment what you have in place, to be able to bring in new and modern technologies and improve the employee or the consumer experience in the first place. Now then, of course, you may end up having multiple systems, which is also not a desirable state. And over time, you need to make a decision of how you harmonize and eventually also save money then, of course. What you in general want is an open system, and this is what we are seeing in discussions with customers that are prepared to deal with the future. And it's best done by supporting standards, by focusing on that market and industry and the related innovation, and being an open and scalable platform. And we see these discussions. And we had a customer the other day, now this is not workforce, but called us up and said, boy, I'm happy I updated my system because my store traffic, it was a bank, but my in-store traffic cut in half within days, but my online traffic went up by 300%.
Yeah.
So you can't if you're prepared, good. If not, you have a challenge on your hand, but we all need to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I say, Alan, I guess maybe not on the Radius side, but are you seeing, like I was saying earlier about the user self-service, are you seeing a big up ramp in those sort of features that the customers want?
Definitely, yeah. So I agree with Gerhard's point there. What we're seeing is people wanting to look at, how do I get what I've already got working and enabled? How do I secure what's already there? At the moment, I can't go into my data center. I can't rip things out. I can't implement brand new complex solutions. So something that can just work with my existing technology, that can work with my existing processes, is absolutely what people are looking for.
Yeah. So are we all finding that customers aren't realizing what they've already got? That they seem to think that they're not really investigating what they've already got in the platforms they put in?
I think it varies.
Yeah, I agree. You have those that have a capable platform and have not fully leveraged the capabilities, but you have also those that, companies that have grown through acquisition or whichever way, right? A very heterogeneous landscape. It was not it was not a top priority to get it into modern times. And we see that, and we see some that just can flip a few switches and be fully capable of what they need to deal with now.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're a little bit over halfway the questions and over halfway of our time. So just to remind anybody, if you have any questions, please use the Ask a Question tab and we'll get to them in a few minutes. So if we move on to our fourth burning question of the day, security practices. What are the best practices we think can help users mitigate the risks these days in this ever-changing landscape of what we are now calling the modern workplace? I mean, this is going to be a question really for Gerhard and Alan, as you guys are the ones who control these sort of things for the users and the access. From our point of view, I'm probably going to echo exactly what you guys are going to say, that we advise customers about using security best practice, making sure they've deployed the right authentication and they have the right step of authentication there, making sure there is a split between the roles they are giving people. A common question we get on the authenticator is, oh, can I have my user certificate on there and an admin certificate on there? It's like, well, yes, you can, but as a best practice, that's you don't want that step-up authentication on the same authenticator, if possible, unless you're already working at that level and you're stepping down. And again, we talk, because we are a hardware authenticator, we're not providing the platform here, we're working with the platforms that you guys are putting in. We then tell people to look at your deployment. So, issuance, loss, revocation, those kind of things. They're always the big questions. They're always kind of policy questions and practice questions as far as we're concerned. There aren't things that we as Yubico enable for the users. We fit into the policies that are there. So this is what we recommend. And then all the normal things we'd expect, look at your compliance requirements. What are your governmental requirements? What's your oversight? What are your banking compliances, depending on the industries we're in? So more theoretical for us, but I'm guessing this is a lot more practical for you. Stop Gerhard on that one.
Sure. Yeah, irrespective of technology and solutions, I think one important point is that companies or enterprises need to have a security policy, and it must be clear to all the employees that this does not just apply to the CEO and the direct staff. There's a lot of people in any organization that deal with customized data, with personal data, with confidential and proprietary information, and that needs to be protected, and it can do a lot of harm when it goes into the false hands. And so I've read a report a few years ago by now, but one IT manager dropped USB sticks in the parking lot, and people were putting them into the machines, and of course there was a little applet on it that basically called the IT department, and there was a policy in place that you can be fired for doing that, but people did, about 30%. That's what the report said. And so educating everyone is a big and important step, but you get adoption only when you have good usability. If you have a policy in place that is very difficult to obey, then people will not do it. And fewer people, the better, the more easy. If it's the natural flow and being compliant at the same time, that is what you want to achieve. So you want that ease of use and the security at the same time. And for that, in modern world, you need to apply some zero trust thinking, and step up the friction as needed. And what does that mean? You need to be able to do things like single sign-on, passwordless authentication, multi-factor, self-service. We talked about it, all the functions around user-managed access, and complying with strong standards, WebAuthn, FIDO, because that makes your system be extensible, leveraging latest and cool technology as it evolves in the marketplace. And all in all, you really want to look for a system that is supporting standards, that provides APIs and is open for extensibility, has some hooks to connect into legacy. Most companies are not able to rip and replace in one go, nor is it desirable. You should be able to migrate at the speed you would, or your business justifies and your pocket allows. And you obviously also want a vendor that is focused on that market, because you don't want to find yourself having to rip and replace everything again 2 years down the road. So, select someone that is focused and committed to this industry would be another advice. Alan?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. So I think one of the challenges customers face moving into this stronger authentication is that there's very few written standards that go beyond the technology. As you say, as WebAuthn, there's FIDO, there's lots of good standards to say, am I using a good technology? But there's very few that talk about how do I deploy it, how do I manage it, some of the life cycle things that Nick was talking about. But there is one out there. So in the US government came up with FIPS 201, subtitled PIV, Personal Identity Verification. That's a standard that talks about how do I identify my government employees. And it doesn't just cover the technology, it covers the business process as well, which is interesting. So that started off talking about smart cards and PKI, but then lots of customers started holding up their iPhones and their iPads and their Android devices and say, what about these? So that standard moved. That standard was adapted. It started to talk about mobile devices. Version 3 of that, which is likely to be out sometime next year, will absolutely start to extend the range of supported devices, the USB token. So that's one of the reasons I believe that the YubiKey has the PIV applet on there. It's standards based, which is great. But it's also going to start talking about FIDO as well. So an organization doesn't have to start from a blank piece of paper and say, what do I do? A lot of our aerospace and defense customers who do business with government looked at FIPS 201 and said, well, how can I adapt that for myself? Some of our banking customers, even as far as Asia Pacific, looked at this and said, well, I don't want to start from the beginning. I want to look at a standard that's out there. How can I adapt it? How can I make it fit my particular needs? So that is one thing I would recommend. Have a look at that standard, look at how you can adapt it to fit your needs. And it also brings in a second benefit, which Gerhard pointed out there, which I think is really valuable. Authentication, identity, and access management systems tend to be quite sticky. They go into an organization and they stay there for quite a while. Hopefully they can adapt, they can change, they can move forwards. But if you pick a technology or a vendor who's not going to be there in 5 years' time, you've got a big piece of expensive technology to change. One of the things FIPS 201 did is really drive the market. So that device vendors, IDAM vendors, PKI vendors, mobile technology, HSMs, printers, all of these things followed that standard and adhered to that standard. And that's a very big market. So that drives those vendors to follow those standards. And it pretty much means that with that investment, that market's ongoing. They're still going to be in that space. So we deployed our first systems back in 2006, and we're still working on PIV. We're looking ahead at the next one. And that's not just about Intercede, that's about the other vendors in that space as well. They're going to be there, they're going to be doing that, they're going to be working on that. So you know you're following a standard that's going to be there, the vendor's still going to be there, and it's adapting to the market needs as well. So that would be my main advice.
Yeah, no, very good advice. I like the USB in the car park one. I've seen that a couple of times, but it also, I mean, that's a great example of people not following a security policy, that they're going to pick this up and take it in. Back in the day where everybody smoked, physical penetration testing, I used to follow a few people around, and smoking back in the day was a great thing because, you have all the smart card entry system, you have the security guard there, you have the turnstile, you have the toughened glass. And because nobody thinks to put us a smoking area either in the building or in a secure part at the back of the building in a gated area, what you have at 8:45, 8:45 in the morning is a fire door propped open with a brick and 3 or 4 people, so that's having a fag. So you rock up with a phone and a fag on, and you're straight into the building. You circumvent all those security controls because you haven't thought about that whole perimeter, the whole journey for the user. You've made it difficult for the user to have a fag, and that just negates your whole security. So I think they're all very good points there. And like you say, Alan, about adapting, we see it with the vendors. Everybody's adapting to doing more overarching credential control and management, and making sure those flows are there. Like we keep saying about the user being a part of the modern workplace and that flow of issuance, but it is a real big thing, and you need those policies there. And also, again, just hark back to the NCSC thing. We're seeing a lot of more companies, I don't know if you've seen the same thing, who are now quoting NCSC and DHS and all the CISA guidelines. We're seeing a lot more of that definitely that they are quoting government cybersecurity advice now, those policies. Are you seeing an uptake in that as well? From the federal point of view and government point of view, it's probably day to day for ForgeRock, but Gerhard, are you seeing a lot of increase in people following government cybersecurity advice?
Yes. So I'm not so intimately involved on that, but yes, there is, of course, always the desire on customers to do it right, yeah, and looking for guidelines, policies, whatever. Yeah, we see that varying around the world, though, but it's not the same everywhere.
Yeah, okay. I would agree. It's knowing what good looks like as a start point is key.
Yeah, it always helps. Okay, so if we just move on to our final kind of point of today, I don't seem to be able to use the slides anymore. But basically, kind of what we talked about is what are our main thoughts we want people to take away from this? I probably won't be more than one thought. So I'll just give a quick overview of my thinking around this. That I think our view and what we'd like to take people take away from it is the landscape has fundamentally changed. The workplace as an idea is a lot more fluid now. So we need to protect it. We need to adjust our thinking around that about protecting the user and the platforms they're accessing. Deployment, user self-service, and that lifecycle management, I think, is going to be a lot more important to people and businesses. So the thought I'd like people to take away is that the user needs to be secured. You need to give that mobility, and you need to look at the processes and policies you've got in place really to protect the user, be it physically at a desk in your office, or now what is going to become the new workplace, in effect, their own home office or their kitchen and so forth. So bearing in mind that the corporate network is probably how now encompass the cloud, and this on-prem, off-prem idea for work anyway might become redundant. That's what I kind of want people to think about taking away from this. So, Alan, your thoughts around that?
So I think probably the main one for me is that there is no one size fits all. It's relatively straightforward to secure, say, 60-70% of your workforce or applications, but to go that final mile to really get rid of passwords completely everywhere, you're not going to find one particular authentication technology that does all of that for all of your employees. So you're probably going to need a mix: PKI, FIDO, USB tokens, mobile ID. So look for something that allows you the flexibility to have a wide range of authentication mechanisms. Look for something that allows you to manage those so you don't need separate silos. And look for something that's designed to be flexible. So huge amounts have changed in the last few weeks about how we all get into our systems. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? So build something, buy something, implement something that doesn't fit you in a box, that gives you that flexibility. That would be my main advice.
Excellent. Gerhard?
Yeah, Alan, thank you. Perfect. We can help. Yeah, couldn't agree more. But since I also get to choose one topic that the audience should take away, yeah, I think it's a call to action. Start now, a sense of urgency. Right? Does COVID have an impact? Because you have much more people working remotely, and then. And analyze, your real exposure. Regulatory compliance is one thing, yeah, and you need to be compliant, no question about that. But analyze the real risk that your company faces, irrespective of what compliance needs to be, right? Sometimes that may be more than you feel is justified, but it could easily be the other way around. And you need to address your real risk exposure as a company, and not just the compliance needs. And identify the gaps, start with an analysis, identify the gaps and the weak points, and address them step by step, in an agile process, not rip and replace. And as Ellen pointed out so nicely, I couldn't have done it any better. Yeah? Look for a platform that's open, that's scalable, that supports the standards that are out there. Look for partners that focus on that industry. Don't be shy to ask for help. We are all happy to help. There's others out there in the market as well. It's not, don't be afraid of not having all the knowledge inside. COVID-19 has changed the landscape dramatically, so it's perfectly okay to ask for help. And yeah, that would be the thought that I would leave the audience with.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. I hopefully we've given some insight for people about the modern workplace. Going to swap over to the Q&A because we're slightly overrunning. So if I can work the slides. Obviously, I can't work the slides for some reason. Okay, so one question that's come in that's followed on from, I think, just what we were talking about, really, is do we see governments increasingly wanting to deploy strong IDs for the citizens? And do we think the pandemic shutdown has made this more relevant? I think just from saying on my closing thoughts that we are, or just before then, we are seeing a lot more, certainly from the businesses following government advice, as Yubico, as an organisation. We, not really from Yubico, I think we are very heavily involved, certainly in mainland Europe, in EID solutions to start with. And I think that's probably going to be the case for all three of us on the call, that we do a lot with government around digital identity to start with. So I think it's certainly going to throw up more solutions that are going to need strong authentication, maybe not as a citizen ID solution, but there's all the concerns about the NHS and the COVID tracking, with whether we're using Google and Apple APIs and so forth, and privacy. So I think it's going to throw up a lot more government platforms. Gerhard, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I was going to bring up the COVID-19 tracking apps as well. I live in Germany, so data protection and privacy is very highly rated here. So the government will invest into a COVID-19 tracking app that will be the mother of all apps, I guess. But joking aside, it will have a huge impact, and I think we will see the fallout probably and hopefully after we are done with the direct effect of this pandemic. Everything electronic. There's a lot of government processes that are still paper-based, where you have to go to a certain place, where you have to put a signature in place, also on the doctor. You have healthcare, you have all the government-related stuff. You have insurance transactions that, you had seen a person and you don't need to see a person anymore. So yes, it will have a huge impact, and it will be with us for hopefully much longer than the pandemic itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alan, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've actually got a real-world example of this. So my ID was used to deploy the national ID of Kuwait, which was originally on smart cards to citizens and residents. And for about the last 12, 18 months, we've been working with them to take that mobile. So how do I take a digital identity held on a physical smart card? How do I take that to a mobile device? And I'm sure now they're extremely happy they've done that, because what it allows them to do is to have a citizen to collect a new national ID when their old one expires on their mobile device without having to go in and visit anybody. So it enables that self-service. It does introduce some very interesting challenges in that I could take my national ID into a bank or healthcare organization. I can prove I'm a citizen. I can get healthcare. I can open a new bank account or get a new bank loan with a strong form of identity. And I can do that by putting my card in a reader and authenticating myself. It's harder to do that on the siloed nature of mobile apps. So there's some quite interesting technologies implemented there to allow one government app to provide ID services to other apps, which again allows that national identity to be expanded. So I'm seeing quite a lot of similarities in the technology needs of citizen ID and employee ID. It's just generally the policies and the culture around it are very, very different. But the technology is definitely moving in the same direction. So a lot of the things we've been talking about the modern workplace are the same for a modern citizen. How do I access government services from a mobile device, etc.?
Okay, excellent. We'll take one quick extra question. We're overrunning slightly now, and it really follows on from the last one, actually, which is quite nice. The questions we haven't got around to, we will collate and we'll get back to people after this. This will be available as recording, by the way, if you want to share it or get back to anything. And there will be contact details just at the end if I can work the slides if you need to get in contact with any of us. So just a quick final question, whilst we have the time, is following on the government one, really. Which industries have struggled most with the efforts to modernise the workplace? Is kind of the question. I thought it followed on quite nice from the government one. Again, from a Yubico point of view, from I guess you guys' point of view, we're all across all industries and all verticals. So it's a bit hard. We will. I'd struggle to answer it really, quite honestly. We, from manufacturing to high tech to pharmaceutical to groceries, we're in all of them, and I'd say it's not an industry. It's just businesses who we go in, they don't understand security. They don't understand why they're doing the security is what we see more, rather than a particular industry sector. But Gerhard, do you have thoughts on that? Do you see particular areas they struggle?
Sure. Yeah, and I tend to agree. I mean, yes, you have some laggers. The classic manufacturing and construction industry probably has not been on the forefront of modern workplaces. And I share an example there in a moment. But yeah, I think is equally important of how this enterprise came into today's state, right? Was it organic growth? Was it growing through acquisition? How were the companies integrated? That leads to a heterogeneous or more homogeneous implementation of identity and access management. And honestly, we've seen anything from a high single, low double-digit number of different IAM systems in place, all the way to a 3-digit number that need to be consolidated at some point in time. So the landscape is quite diverse, but it's happening everywhere. No one is free from it. And this is an example that just happened a few months ago with a company that makes small construction equipment, and only a small percentage of their equipment was connected in the past, and it plays a little bit to my other responsibility in IoT. And then the company decided to connect all the devices and connect them anyway by default, because they wanted to collect the data of how the equipment is used and leverage it for new product development to determine which features are important and which are not so important. And then they found out, Jesus, these devices are now used by people, and I need a consent mechanism. And, construction equipment was sold on paper, right? And you sign T's and C's and you're done, and someone owns it, and give it on to someone else, and now you have a connected device. How on earth do you deal now with different T's and C's over a period of time and with consent management? And you need really an identity and access management to do that, one that can do versioning on these things and collect consent and actually be auditable and prove that these things have been done right. And so, yeah, it's happening everywhere. Probably, banks and insurance companies may be further along than the manufacturing industry, but, you better, that's my call to action earlier. If you haven't looked at it, look at it, because there's no better day than starting today.
Alan?
Yes, I think one of the challenges people face is compliance. So certainly industry by industry, there are different security rules you need to comply with, government, oil and gas, for example. But probably one of the biggest patterns we see is the size of the organization. So if you're a small organization, you might not have the IT support and skills in-house to be able to deploy these security solutions. You might need to look for a managed service. And the larger organizations tend to be global. Therefore, they have different offices in many different countries, and the data privacy rules in Germany, for example, are very different than they are in the US. So they may have to have a system that can implement multiple policies depending on the region those particular offices are deployed in. So again, it comes back to that flexibility. You need to find something that can deal with the fact that I might need different policies and different compliance rules in different regions for different populations.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I think that's about all we've got time for. I can't, my slides seem to have failed on me. Excellent. Something always has to go wrong. That's not too bad, though. Really, just one slide rest just for if people want to get in contact with any of us, either talk to, if you've already got a representation with ourselves, Intercede or ForgeRock, you will have routes in. Either sales@forgerock.com, sales@yubico.com, or info@intercede.com will get you through to people. and I guess whatever route you come through for this webinar. So I hope it's useful. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Gerhard, for coming on and spending time talking to hopefully people out there. Any questions to say that have come in that we haven't answered, we'll collate, and between us we will get back to you on it. And I say there will be a recording of this available shortly. So once again, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Keep safe.
Thank you, Nick, Alan. Thank you, audience, for dialing in.
Bye.
Bye-bye.